Well, the facts as we know them are pretty much out in the open as far as he, I guess I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, but he had some kind of an altercation or a verbal argument with his girlfriend, longtime girlfriend. He had left the house, and I think he was heading over to the Kern Medical Center. I believe he was trying to get some kind of help. I don't know it was for exactly what it was. He was turned away from there and asked to go somewhere else, which was right across the street from the Kern Medical Center. At some point, I guess he was drunk and he passed out on the ground. Or I believe before that he was sleeping on the grounds of Kern Medical Center, and a guard had come up to him and told him, "Hey, you can come here, but you can't sleep here." He wandered across the street, and I guess he passed out, according to one of the witnesses that I talked to. Just looked like he just fell down straight on the ground. After that point, I believe the guard or someone had called 911, saying that there was a drunk man sleeping on the ground. After that, I believe the first responder was a canine officer, and he responded by, I believe, trying to rattle him up. At some point, he got the dog out of his car, and the dog was mauling David. And from everything that I could see, it looked like at some point there were several officers just wailing away at him with batons. It looked like they were doing like it was a batting practice, basically, just like you said, they murdered him on the street. Basically, they murdered him on the street. I don't condone the fact that my son was drunk or passed out, but in what world does that kind of a crime meet that kind of punishment? And then whether the sheriff or anyone can say that that's justifiable. Now they're trying to say that my son had high blood pressure, that he had meth in his system, that he was depressed. I don't know. He died of natural causes. That's what they're trying to say. I mean, really, how can a sheriff, anyone say that after what they saw in the video? He's basically saying, don't believe your lying eyes or your lying ears, because we did nothing wrong here. He died of natural causes. He's 33 years old.
Man. I was going to ask you about that because I saw just yesterday where they came out and they ruled David's death to be accidental, and they said that he had a heart attack. And the first question you're looking at, and to me, in my mind, it said, well, what the hell brought on that heart attack? Even if that was true, the man was being beat to within an inch of his life. What would bring on a heart attack? Something like that? And actually, when you mentioned the dog, I thought that was very interesting because they're doing a big effort to demonize David in all that they can. I mean, they even pulled out none of which people have to be clear about this. None of these things that they talk about David having done are, as you said, in what kind of world would you get the death sentence for that? And they even bring out a thing of a minor charge. They said disturbing the peace. Disturbing the peace means that David was a criminal deserving of being murdered. That's what they're saying, and it was just
according to them, apparently that's justifiable. I pretty much could have, everyone in our family and anyone that has any information or has any knowledge about this case, I don't think that we are surprised whatsoever what the sheriff said. Mm-hmm. He was, there was under any circumstances, there are no circumstances where they have any liability in this matter. Although they murdered my son, they say, he died of natural causes. Really, don't believe your eyes, don't believe your ears, don't believe the witnesses, don't believe anything, but believe what the sheriff, our good sheriff, has to say. As far as I'm concerned, he is an accomplice to murder.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Let's talk about what you said about the witnesses. There were a number of witnesses to what was going on. Let's talk about that because they also, the demonization, they also brought out suddenly they were finding all these things in their backgrounds and accusing them of having committed crimes or being charged with things in the past, as if that should then undercut, as you said, their eyes and what they saw, and in fact, what many of them had recorded. Can you talk about the witnesses and how you found out about this whole scene?
Well, as soon as it happened, we went over to the area where the altercation took place, and we met people pretty quickly that said, they saw things and they recorded it. We actually talked to several people, 2 or 3 people that had the video phones taken away from them. They told how they were held in their apartments without even being able to move away from the phone or go to work or anything for 12 hours. They were to be held hostage. So they could retrieve those videos and the phones. And the phones hadn't been returned for several days. I don't know why. I don't understand why in this day and age someone couldn't have just asked the people for a copy of the videos that were on the phone and taken that. I don't understand. I don't understand why one of the phones mysteriously didn't have any video on it. When I had spoken to the lady that took the video, and she told me that not only did she take the video, she saw the video on the phone. So obviously there was video on the phone, but they don't have any video on the phone anymore. And the sheriff is saying that the press and the media are all trying to sensationalize this. I don't know what planet this guy is from. I mean, really, how can anyone say that someone being passed out drunk on the street justifies being beaten to death like a dog? You know, screaming. You can hear it on the video. You can see the baton strikes, even though the video is pretty grainy. There's no question as to what happened. But according to the sheriff, he died of natural causes because he was overweight and had a heart attack. Really?
Jeez. Go ahead.
I just can't believe anybody that could believe that. And it's like they're murdering us every time they come up with this stuff every day. You know, there's no liability on their part. Basically, the police can do whatever they want to whoever they want, and the sheriff also said several things on the television when he made his press conferences that were just down and outright lies. He said that this case will be handled no different than if it were any civilian case. Well, I'd like to ask the sheriff if I were involved in an altercation like that and I was suspected of beating someone to death or beating someone or being involved in any kind of incident like that, would I be able to go home, investigate myself, and then tell you that I could get back to you? Would I be able to do that? Would you be able to do that? Well, they can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's preposterous.
Yeah, it's preposterous. It's enraging. And, this is the thing. I mean, this is the point here with all these. Every time they murder someone, it always ends up, one, you always know what's going to be at the back end of their investigation is going to be justifiable homicide or justifiable. Their actions were justifiable. They don't even call it homicide, really. But they also, in relation to what you're talking about, I mean, it's very heavy because this whole thing of they murder the people, they murder our people twice. They murder the people once when they actually carry out the act, and then they proceed to murder them by attacking their reputation and trying to make it seem like the person did something to deserve it. And that is so stark.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And the only thing that they could find, my son's total criminal history was public intoxication or something like that. I mean, really, that's. Is he some kind of a mastermind criminal, murderer? I can't even believe that they would come up with that.
Yeah.
And then the people that had the videos, of course, they're demonizing them because they had some criminal history and things like that. And you can't believe anything they say. However, one thing I don't understand, they have obtained records stating that my son had methamphetamines in his system, which I really don't believe he did. My son had ADHD, and he did take medication for it. And in some cases, I've heard that could come up as some kind of meth or some kind of I'm not really that familiar with these drugs, but I'd like to find out if they drug tested any of the officers that were there. Did they do that?
Yeah, good point. One of the things too is you mentioned that they keep saying that. Well, one of the things that the sheriff said was, well, we didn't do any head blows, and of course all the witnesses say they saw these 8 cops.
I saw his head. There were definitely head blows. His head was just purple in the back of his head. I saw him.
God.
That was a lie.
Yeah.
Well, because he says it, and he's sheriff, he can say whatever I think that statement was being prepared the day the incident happened, regardless of what the outcome was going to be. Maybe some little small facts could have been changed around, but that was already set up. There is no way that the sheriff's department is at fault for anything here, according to the sheriff.
Well, let me ask you this. one thing I want to know, because, what happens is exactly what you're saying, the demonization of David. It happens, and as I said, that murdering you twice. I want you to have a chance to tell my listeners. First, let me tell my listeners that we're talking today with Sal Silva. He's the father of David Sal Silva, who was murdered by the sheriff's deputies up in Bakersfield on May 8th. And he was murdered for simply possibly being intoxicated and falling out on the sidewalk and being assaulted after being beaten by 8 cops and mauled by a dog. And then then they turn around and say that, well, he died an accidental death. Sal, I want you to tell people what David was like, because we never get to hear what the person that police have murdered was like. What was David like?
David was, and everyone would say this, David was a big teddy bear. I mean, he was a big guy, but he smiled and he could just light up a room. He had 4 kids that loved him to death, went everywhere with him. He basically took care of all of his kids, had 4 kids. He was a loving father. I think one of the things that I can remember, I guess the best, and I think his mother was the one that mentioned it the other day to me, and it reminded me of how kind he was. David didn't have much money ever. He wasn't really working. He was just barely squeaking by. On Father's Day, I can remember my wife said the same thing about Mother's Day. My ex-wife said that every Mother's Day she would buy him some peanut butter brittle and buy her some candy from the 99-cent store and get a good card, and how much that meant to her. Well, he did the same thing for me. It was just stuff that you would never think of being very important or certainly not expensive. This is stuff from the 99-cent store, but it's something that came from his heart, because he wanted you to know that he was thinking about you and he loved you, and that's the kind of a person that David was.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that your other son, I think is Chris is his name?
My youngest son is Chris.
Yes. And he's been speaking out a lot. He made a point that he never really thought this much about what the police do until David was murdered, and then he went and investigated it, and he made a statement about this has to stop. What about in your case? Were you aware of the history of the Bakersfield police?
I, just like many people, unless it affects you personally, you hear about it, you read about it, you kind of think, well, they must have deserved it, or they, but I certainly, just like my son Chris, have a whole different perspective on this now. There's absolutely no justification for something like this to a human being, any human being, much less a son that was loved and has a kid, and has a family that loves him, and, perhaps he had a drinking problem. There's no justification for something like this. And my whole outlook on the system is broken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're going to move to wrapping this up, but I want to ask you 2 questions. One, what would you say? This is your moment to say what you think completely about the murder and to the police about what they did, and then I want to ask you what you say to the people who are listening now.
I would just say that anyone that has seen or heard anything about this story and has listened to what the sheriff's department has publicly stated, you can make up your own mind as to what happened. I mean, I think all the facts are pretty much out there. The way that they have tried to demonize my son, the way that they take absolutely no responsibility for anything. My son actually, according to natural causes, because he had a heart attack. I mean, really,
yeah.
And to the people out there that are listening to this that were just like me just a few weeks ago that thinks every time that something like this happens, it must have been justifiable. The people must have asked for the beating or being killed or whatever the police officers did. I hope that you never have to walk in my shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that something like this doesn't happen to a loved one in your family, because then you would understand what's going on and how wrong it is. And people do have to stand up, and we have to get justice. We have to change the system. That obviously, if there's 8 police officers involved, if there's a sheriff involved, and not one person, not one says we could have done something differently. We shouldn't have done this. We shouldn't have done that. No, there is absolutely no they have no responsibility in this, and that is just that kills me.
Mm-hmm. All right, Sal, thank you very much for joining us today, and we will continue to stay in touch with you and follow things as they develop in the case. So I look
I
forward to talking to
appreciate
you
it.
again. Sure.